a Hungarian folktale. Yes, one of my favorites. There was once a young woman named Magda. She was not a pleasant young woman, nor a pretty young woman, nor actually all that young anymore. Nonetheless, Magda had a very high opinion of herself, and every Saturday night when they had the dances in the town hall, she and all the other girls would line up at the windows to see if the gentleman would ask them to dance. And nobody ever asked Magda, which she couldn't understand at all. Here she was, single, available. Yeah, that about covered it. Finally, in a temper one evening, Magda, who couldn't understand why nobody was asking her to dance, stamped her foot and said, "You know what? Next Saturday night, if the devil himself turned up to dance, I would say yes to dance with him." Well, a minor demon passing by at that moment thought, "This one's easy. Another soul to bring down to hell, not a problem. This would be, this is cake. This is so easy." So the next Saturday, Magda was pressed up against the windows with all the other girls at the dance, and most of the village was in a stir because there was a tall, handsome, dark-haired young man. Nobody had ever seen him before. He had beautiful manners. It was apparent from the way he shifted his feet that he could really dance. And he kept looking at the windows to see, which girl he was going to choose to dance. And all of the girls were all a Twitter. And finally, he spotted Magda and beckoned to her. It was, of course, the minor demon in disguise. Well, they danced, and they danced, and they danced all night. And Magda, this has been what she'd been picturing for years. Tall, dark, handsome man taking her dancing on Saturday night in front of everybody who had always told her that she was mean and harsh and clingy and not very pretty and not very young either. And all of this was true, but she didn't think so. But she finally was vindicated by dancing all night with a handsome man, and when the end of the evening came, he went to let go of her hand, and she thought, "I'm not letting this one get away." And she hung on to him like glue. Now this poor minor demon was getting a bit confused, Normally at this point, he would tell people he was about to take their soul, and they would run screaming, and she didn't care. She just hung on to him because, tall, dark, and handsome. When's she going to catch another one of those anytime soon? The demon started to get panicky. He already had her soul in his pocket. His job was done. He just needed to shed the girl who wouldn't let go. And he hadn't been on his feet this long in ages. Normally he had hooves, and those were a little bit better for walking on hard surfaces and even dancing. But he didn't think that would pass at the village dance. And he tried shaking her off his arm, and she clung tighter, and she flung her arms around his neck and said, "Oh, we'll be together forever." And the poor demon was just about ready to die of fright. And he thought, I've got to take this downstairs to my boss because I can't peel her loose, and I'm getting scared. So with a poof of smoke, with Magda still clinging for dear life to that smoke, the demon took her straight down to hell, and he dragged her into the devil's great throne room, and the devil said, "You seem to have something stuck to you." And the demon said, "Help! Help! I've already got her soul, I can't get rid of the girl." And the devil said, "I think you're going to have to figure this one out for yourself," laughing almost too hard to breathe. If he breathed, which we're not entirely sure if the devil does because he's the devil, but So the poor demon thought, maybe if I take her back up to the world, I can scrape her off on a rock or something. And the poor demon drags her back up into the world, and he's over hill, over dale, dragging, and she's still hanging onto his neck, telling him they'll have beautiful dark-haired babies, which by now The devil had a serious case of the willies going down his back every single second she spoke. Well, it was late afternoon the next day. The poor demon is dragging Magda along, and he sees up on a hillside a shepherd. And he thought, what a nice job that must be. Herding sheep, sitting on the hillside, no people, no woman, stuck to your neck like a barnacle. Then he got an idea. As he got a little closer to the shepherd was actually pretty good looking, you know. He was a tall, handsome guy, bright gold hair, you know. And the demon goes up to the shepherd. And Magda was so busy whispering sweet nothings in his ear, he said, I'll make you a deal. I will owe you such favors. But please, please take this girl off me. She's stuck like a barnacle and I can't get loose. Well, the shepherd was a nice guy. I mean, he would help almost anybody for nothing, but you know, a favor from a demon, that's actually worth something, you know? That's good stuff. So he said, sure. And the demon said to Magda, look, here's this beautiful, tall, blonde man, you know. You could have him instead. I mean, think, your babies would have beautiful gold hair, you know. Just go to him. Well, Mag decides to cheer them up, and the shepherd, good-looking guy, she swapped over and latched onto the shepherd like a barnacle. The demon let out the biggest, deepest, most heartfelt sigh of his entire existence. Not life exactly, because demons don't really live the way we do, but you know, he was very, very relieved, and with a poof of green smoke, he disappeared, and he sat in hell for the next 4 days with his feet up on one of the backs of the souls that were stuck in hell, because he had never spent so much time on his feet with a woman stuck around his neck in his entire existence. He was exhausted. Well, the shepherd was kind of amused by this girl, and he was, you know, kind of a thinking guy, and, you know, he had to bring his sheep in that night, and she was still stuck around with their arms around his neck, sweet nothings, and he's thinking, well, you know, this won't do forever, because, wow, look at her. He thought, okay, I'm going to have to think of something to get rid of this woman. So he's herding his sheep along and dragging her, and one of the things that he usually had wore out on the hillside because it could get really chilly was a big old sheepskin coat. And Magda, when she had latched onto him, was sort of latched onto the coat because it was so big and heavy and floofy. You know, she had her hands in that while she whispered sweet nothings. And on his way home, he had to drive his sheep across a bridge. And there was a tiny little river down below, maybe a foot deep, you know, the kind I'm talking about, you can wade. But there was a bridge, and he thought, okay. And he got to the top of the bridge, and then he shrugged one shoulder over, undid the button at the neck of the big old sheepskin coat, and over the side of the bridge flew Magda, still clutching his sheepskin coat, and sploosh into the water. The shepherd was free. And he got his sheep home, and he thought, hey, you know, that's a funny story. I'll be able to, you know, somebody will take me out to dinner some night on the strength of that one. And he never really thought about, you know, the favors that the demon had promised him. Well, you have to understand that the small country, the barony, that the shepherd lived in was run by a profoundly evil and terrible baron. He was horrible. He had no sense of humor and an acutely tuned idea of punishment and what crimes were kind of arbitrary. He was awful. He tortured some people for fun. He was wretched. Thankfully, he mostly tortured people he sort of knew personally, so the shepherd had never actually met him. But his reputation was awful. And worst of all, he had 2 lieutenants that were just as bad as he was. Now, the only human-seeming quality of this baron was a dependence on astrology. He always wanted to know what was going to happen. And one fine morning, about a week after the shepherd had rid himself of Magda, the Baron asked for the court astrologer. And the court astrologer calculated out his charts, and then he turned 4 shades of pale and said, "Do I have to say what this says?" "Yes," said the Baron. "All right," said the astrologer. "This says at the beginning of next month, the first day of next month, your first lieutenant is going to be dragged down to hell by a demon. And the second day of next month, your second lieutenant is going to be dragged down to hell by a demon. And on the third day of next month, you're going to be dragged down to hell by the same demon." "That is a terrible astrological update," said the Baron. "Kill him." Of course, the poor astrologer was dragged off and killed. The Baron wasn't fooling around with this stuff. He was a terrible, terrible man. But he was getting curious again, so he called for another astrologer, and they kind of had to hunt one down because news travels fast, and you don't want to be the astrologer who gives the Baron good news, but they finally managed to catch one who was crossing the border in the cover of night, and they dragged him back and said, "Okay, cast the horoscope," and cast the horoscope, and he bit his lip really hard. "All right," said the Baron, "what do the stars actually say? Don't think of lying." "Well," said the astrologer, "it said you're going to have a really wonderful day tomorrow." "I mean about next month," said the Baron. "Well," said the astrologer, "it says on the first day of next month, one of your lieutenants is going to be dragged down to hell by a demon. And then the second day, your second lieutenant's going to be dragged down to hell by a demon. And the third day, you're going to be gone too." "That terrible astrological report," said the Baron. "Kill that one," and off he was dragged and killed. And, there was a small parade of various, palm readers and tarot card readers who were dragged reluctantly into court, and everybody agreed that pretty much next month was going to be really bad for the Baron and his lieutenants. Well, in the meantime, the poor demon's feet had finally healed up. So he had to go about his regular job of, collecting souls and stuff. And, demons aren't, they're demons, but a bargain is a bargain. And he had promised a couple of favors to the shepherd in return for peeling that woman limpet off his neck. And so he appeared to the shepherd one afternoon and said, "Listen, I have a deal for you. You've been hearing about what's been going on with the Baron and his 2 lieutenants?" "Of course," said the shepherd. "Everybody's talking about it. My buddies and I have a betting pool going on what time of day, "Well," said the demon, "here's the deal. I owe you big. So what I want you to do is to go to the first lieutenant, who's supposed to be dragged down to hell, and tell him that you can save him from the demon for a sack of gold. And then when I come to drag him down to hell, you can just, yell at me and tell me to go away, and I'll disappear. And then the second lieutenant will come to you, and you'll be able to set your price to save him." He said, "But really, just understand, we're willing to wait a little while on the lieutenants. They're not as evil. But the Baron, he's toast. Third day of next month, he is going straight to hell, so don't try and interfere with that one." Well, the shepherd thought this sounded pretty good. I mean, he liked his job, he liked his sheep, he liked his hillside, but, a bag of gold is never amiss. So he went to the first lieutenant, the first one scheduled to be dragged down to hell, and said, "Hey, I would be, happy to save your life. I'm a famous demon banisher. And you just have to promise me a bag of gold." Well, the lieutenant hemmed and hawed because that was an awful lot of gold. But he said, "If you can do it, bag of gold." So around rolled the first day of the month. Meanwhile, people being people, wanting to see a show, they crowded around the front gates of the lieutenant's house, figuring, this could be entertaining. And the demon poofed into existence, and he was huge, and he was like, a good 8 feet tall, and he was breathing green smoke, and he started to reach for the lieutenant, who was shaking in his shoes, and the shepherd came charging up and said, you demons aren't supposed to be here, I banish you, you need to leave right away. And the demon slipped him awake, and poof, he went in a big cloud of greenish smoke. And, the lieutenant was very impressed and handed over the bag of gold. It was only short a few pieces, he wasn't redeemed exactly, but he'd had a good scare. The second lieutenant, who was due to be dragged down to hell, heard of this feat of demon banishing and sent for the shepherd and said, I will give you 2 bags of gold if you rescue me from that demon. Well, said the shepherd, I think I can do that. And so they, first thing in the morning in front of the second lieutenant's house, people are eating popcorn, watching through the gates, And poof, into existence. The demon was now 10 feet tall. He had curling green horns coming off his head. He's breathing all kinds of smoke and fire. He says, I've come to drag you down to hell to the lieutenant. And the shepherd comes charging in and says, you need to leave right now. You shouldn't be here. Get gone. I banish you. And the demon slipped him a wink, and woof, and a gout of fire and smoke. And the second lieutenant handed over the gold. Maybe a week late, but, wasn't entirely reformed. Well, the Baron by now had heard of this amazing performance of a demon-banishing shepherd. And he called the shepherd to him and said, I will give you 3 bags of gold if you banish the demon that's coming to drag me down to hell tomorrow. And the shepherd said, I don't think I can do that. Or I could kill you right now, said the Baron. I could try, said the shepherd. And all that night he couldn't sleep. He knew that the Baron was doomed. The demon had told him that he had to drag him down to hell. There was no getting out of this one. And finally, after he'd lain awake all night, he had a brilliant idea. So the morning comes, everybody's out in the front courtyard of the Baron's big country house. People are by the gates, lots of them with popcorn, someone was selling snacks, They're watching to see this evil monster of a guy get dragged down to hell. And there was a fair few, palm readers and astrologers in the crowd who were ready to applaud once he was gone. And the shepherd thought, oh boy, I hope this works. And then, right the same time as the previous 2 days, the demon poofed into existence. He was 11 feet tall. His horns had streaks of red and the green curling back. He's breathing green smoke. He's snorting. He's full of fire. And he says to the Baron, come with me. I've come to drag you down to hell. And the shepherd comes rushing out and says, you shouldn't be here. You need to leave right now. And the demon says to him, what are you doing? What are you doing? I told you can't save this one. Boss has spoken. Gotta drag him down. It's the rule. No, you don't understand, said the shepherd. It's that girl Magda. She's still got a crush on you, and she's coming up to the gates right now. Oh, no, said the demon, and hastily disappeared, completely forgot the fireworks on exit. Well, the Baron, with some reluctance, although did eventually pay, handed over 3 bags of gold to the shepherd. So he had 6 bags of gold in all. He still had his flock, he had his job, all was well. The Baron went on not being quite as evil as before. The demon never attended another dance. And if you go to a certain tiny little village in Hungary where they have dances every Saturday night, you will see a woman who is not young, not pretty, and not kind, probably pressed up against the window saying, "Hmm." And that is the story of the demon and the shepherd.
Huzzah!